All right, hello everyone, and thanks for joining us today. Our webinar is Critical Event Management, Landscape, Insights, and Future. My name is Sabrina Forgione. I am on the Critical Event Management Solutions product marketing team here at BlackBerry. I'll be your moderator and a contributor to today's webinar. And on that note, on today's webinar, we have an excellent agenda planned, which includes a special guest speaker from Aberdeen Strategy and Research. Aberdeen and I will talk about critical event management technology and use cases, and Aberdeen will also present recent research that they conducted on the topic. Just a couple of housekeeping items to go through before we begin. So everyone right now is in listening mode. Also, if you take a moment to review, download, and share also the resources located on your screen there, they will complement the content on today's webinar. Also, feel free to submit questions in the Q&A window. If time does permit, we will answer them live or respond after the session as well. In addition, your feedback obviously is very valuable to us, so take a moment to complete the brief survey after the presentation that you will also find on your screen. So once again, thank you for joining us. So quickly again, to introduce myself, Sabrina Forgione here, Product Marketing for Critical Event Management Solutions. Joining us today is Jim Raposa. So Jim is the VP and Principal Analyst, Information Technology at Aberdeen Strategy and Research. So Jim will expose some interesting stats on the state of organizations' well-being when it comes to being hit with unexpected events, share hurdles on what organizations are facing in the recovery process. And so for those who've achieved it, they'll also how they're leveraging technology to gain better visibility into any situation. So I'll contribute as well by offering some best practices on how BlackBerry critical event management technology can help solve the challenges. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Jim to kind of kick us off. So Jim, over to you.
So in today's webinar, we're going to talk about the rising amount of critical events that are really challenging and pressuring and forcing organizations today to quickly respond and effectively respond and limit the impact of these disruptions. We're going to look at the rise of critical event management solutions and how they're really bridging the gap between classic emergency notification systems and IT and cybersecurity monitoring tools, the way they're really helping businesses not just detect these kind of events, but prevent them. We're going to look at some of the benefits that organizations that we've identified as leaders. We're going to look at the benefits that they're gaining through their adoption of critical event management, how it's helping them limit and even prevent critical events from causing massive disruption to their operations. And we'll offer some recommendations and steps that you can follow so you can effectively choose and implement critical event management to really protect your business against these kind of disruptions, these critical events, cyber attacks and disasters, and how you can become a leader yourself. Just a quick note, if you've never been in an Aberdeen webinar or if you're not familiar with Aberdeen Strategy and Research, we are a research and analyst firm. We're a little different than maybe others you run into. We don't tend to rank vendors or products. We look at technology, we look at solutions from an end user perspective. We talk to our community, we survey them, we find out what their challenges are, what their pain points are when it comes to implementing technology. And importantly, we ask success metrics. We see who's having the least amount of disruptions, who's responding most quickly, who's able to reach all of their stakeholders, all of these key metrics. And by doing that, we're able to find out who's doing well, who's a leader in these categories. And once we've identified these leaders, we can look at the technologies they're implementing, the capabilities they follow, the strategies that they're utilizing. And we can make recommendations and steps to follow for other businesses that want to become like these leaders. So with those housekeeping steps out of the way, let's get into today's webinar. So first off, you see this slide. This is not a coronavirus COVID-19 webinar. We're acknowledging it right up front. And a lot of the data we're going to show yes, if you included the pandemic, it would probably be the #1 critical event, the #1 disruption that businesses have faced over the last year. But what we really want to do is look at the other side of this. All of the other things beyond the pandemic that are disrupting businesses, all the other critical events that are causing organizations to lose time, to lose money, to lose resources, to impact their workforce and their capabilities. And there's been a lot. But the one thing that from the pandemic, I think it really raised the awareness of the impact of these kind of critical events. That they can happen anytime. Things that, as a business, you may not have been even conceiving as possible. I think as a business now, you go, okay, almost anything is possible at this time. And what we've seen is that, even in the last year, businesses have seen a lot of huge disruptions, a lot of not just disasters, but critical events that really, cause problems at their businesses. And as we're going to see in the next slide, the tied for #1 outside of the pandemic, when we asked businesses what their top critical events were that, caused impact, that caused disruption, one of the #1 choices tied for #1 was IT outages and failures. So here we go. We researched, a large number of businesses, and we asked them what were their top critical events outside of the pandemic. You see, tied for #1 was IT failure of business critical systems and supply chain disruptions. Now, obviously, on the supply chain, that can be, especially in the last year, tied to the pandemic. We've seen everything from chip shortages to massive ships blocking key transportation and shipping routes that caused huge shortages around the world. Everything from the daily impact of not being able to get paper products to supplying chips for car makers. In general, so you totally understand that supply chain disruption side. But really, IT failures are still one of the top critical events. And I think it's not something people immediately think of when you think of critical events. I think for a lot of businesses, for a lot of organizations, you say critical event, they immediately think of things like storms and power outages and maybe even more serious things, active shooters. There's all kinds of things that traditionally have been in that emergency notification side and which are very important. But as we're going to see, one of the key benefits of solutions like critical event management is to bridge that gap between traditional emergency notification and IT notification and monitoring. So as we see here, there's a real need for that because that is one of the top critical events that businesses are reporting. Rounding out this top 6, we see utility outages. Those happen all the time and often tied to things like storms and weather events. Cyber attacks, that's continuing to grow as a huge disruption, especially when you bring in things like ransomware attacks, traditional denial of service. I mean, increasingly businesses are facing these kind of cybersecurity issues that are, causing business disruptions, that are putting their resources at risk and just causing really costly amounts of downtime. And then at the, rounding out this top 6, and I just want to say this was out of, I think we had a list of over 20 critical events. So these were the top 6, is that, natural disasters, extreme weather, as, we're seeing right now in North America. You're seeing all of those, from fires to massive storms. So no surprise there. But definitely, I think it's an interesting point how IT failures is the #1 critical event that most businesses identified in the last year. So, I've said this, the solution that we've seen that kind of bridges this need for emergency notifications to understand things like when disasters, storms, power outages, things like that are occurring, and also bridge it to, because a lot of the responses need to be done by both sides of a business, from emergency notification and risk management to IT and cybersecurity. And what we've seen is that, in the last few years, we've really seen this rise of critical event management. And what these solutions do is they provide this kind of end-to-end, unified, and automated bridge platform that really, provides greater understanding, greater capabilities to respond to today's threat environment, to respond to these critical events that we just saw. Also, it really helps businesses, speed their response, take faster response, which is, again, we're going to really see how important that is to, not just overcoming these problems, but reducing the impact. they help these businesses notify and protect their key stakeholders in a high variety of ways, and really also help a business understand that they are reaching everybody. And most importantly, critical event management solutions, the right kind, the kind that have the greatest capability levels, they give you this kind of predictive understanding. So many businesses with these systems in place are finding that they're able to prevent future incidents from impacting their business. And before I move to my next, I want to bring in my fellow speaker here, Sabrina. I just want to ask you to talk a little bit about how BlackBerry is defining critical event management, how you approach this with your customers, just your overall approach to critical event management.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. So first of all, great to be talking about this topic. Thank you for addressing it. And you really nailed it, with your definition as you were describing, what it is. Critical event management, or, the acronym we use is CEM. It's not a new concept or a new term. You talked a little bit about the evolution from EMNS, right, mass notification, to CEM. But we recognize that, some folks might be hearing it for the first time. So when we talk about critical event management, we're essentially talking about an organized, a unified approach to how organizations prepare for, respond to, and recover from major critical events. So it's a set of processes, tools, and capabilities. You talked a little bit about this up front. This has been a year like no other. We've had to, we've dealt with and we continue to deal with the global pandemic. And it certainly raised and exposed some gaps on how organizations prepare and respond collectively to major incidents. So really making it a top level issue now for CEOs and the board members. In fact, actually another recent analyst survey on critical events to C-levels suggested that a number one thing that CEOs are interested in is, are we getting accurate data during these events? How is that data flowing to other people that need it in the organization, right? So do we have data that we can trust? Does it give us that situational awareness and intelligence like we need? Do we have the right communication mechanisms in place to get that information to the right people at the right time to help with the overall response? So these are the challenges that, BlackBerry or CEM solutions essentially address. So imagine like one consistent set of tools, technology, processes used across the entire organization. And that's really, why, we want to raise awareness around the subject. You mentioned cyber events, IT outages, but also, other use cases. So consider industrial accidents, building closures, changing pandemic requirements, city by city, day by day, right? How do you communicate and be compliant? When it comes to safety incidents like forest fires, hurricanes, there's a whole set of events that organizations essentially have to deal with. And Jim, you talked a little bit about this too, right? So traditionally, these events have been managed by stovepipe with individual systems in an organization, individual teams, right? All following up with different manners. But we realized over the last year, that as the frequency and intensity of these events are occurring, there's a desire to really have that coordinated view into a situation, right? So having that situational awareness or intelligence across the organization to manage these events, especially when they come together, right? And they're all happening at the same time. So again, clearly, Jim, the respondents of your survey are dealing with, these big issues too. And so our methodology, our approach to CEM is one solution, one platform to manage the entire life cycle of critical events.
Yes, Sabrina, that was really, really great information. And it's interesting too. Well, first off, part of the reason I tend to avoid the CEM acronym is coming from an IT background myself. I hear CEM, I think of like customer experience management or some of the other acronyms. Yeah. So I keep, especially when I'm introducing what is still a relatively new concept. I want to say it out loud, critical event management. But also, I really liked your point about the breadth of things that you're looking at, and it is a really interesting this evolution, because it really does. IT has had these tools for a long time that help them respond to cybersecurity issues, to respond to outages and stuff like that, but no tools to kind of understand these other kind of emergency events. And on the converse side, the parts of a business that have dealt with emergency events, your risk management, business continuity, have had very limited insight into the sort of IT issue side of critical events. So I really think this was something that had to happen. It's one of those, if you build it, they will come kind of situation. And I really think that this was definitely, there was a need, and that's why this kind of category arose. So yeah, thanks. That was really great information there. So we just, Sabrina and I just, defined critical event management, and the ways it impacts businesses and the way it can address issues. But there obviously, as with any technology area, there are challenges, when a business is implementing this, things that both limit the effectiveness of what, critical event management they might have in place, or, the things that the reasons why they really need to improve and upgrade and modernize their ability to manage and understand and respond to critical events. So when we asked our survey respondents what those top challenges were, the number one challenge was lack of 100% reach. And really, and this has been one of the top challenges going back to those, mass notification systems, is that because that is key. You need to be able to reach every single stakeholder, everybody who's impacted by, an outage, by a cyber attack, by a weather event, by a natural disaster, and that obviously involves a lot of different ways to contact these stakeholders, especially now in a predominantly work from home or a majority work from home environment. If you look at some of the oldest iterations of these systems, they would use building intercoms and things like that to reach everybody. And while in some businesses that's still a really important method of notification, to reach a modern workforce, you need to have that 100% reach. You need to be able to contact on multiple ways, through mobile, through email, through work collaboration systems like Slack, through UC, through there's a whole bunch of different ways that you need to make sure you're reaching everybody who needs to be notified, and that you've reached them too, which is always a key component of that. System downtime. We talked about how IT outages are key critical event. If your event management system, if your critical event management system is down, obviously that's an issue. It can't respond. And sometimes, if the system isn't designed well, it can be a victim of the actual critical event that you're trying to respond to. So the way you deploy CEM is equally critical to success. Sabrina just spoke about that ability to measure the impact or size of a critical event. And this is really important to your ability to respond no matter the event. This has been someone who's covered cybersecurity before. You often see where like a major cybersecurity issue is happening, everyone in IT and in the security side is freaking out, doing everything they can, and the rest of the business is just sort of like, the network's slow. So being able to understand the impact is critical to your ability to respond and manage these kind of critical events. And that goes also to this kind of ineffective communication. Everybody who's being impacted needs to know what's going on, whether it is, a natural disaster or, a IT system outage. That lack of integration, always a huge challenge. The best systems, are tied into key enterprise systems like HR, like ERP, like your collaboration and UC systems. You really need tight integration to have success in that area. And finally, out of these top, I believe 7 here or 6 challenges, just having a limited ability to respond. We're going to dive into that a little bit more and how that diverges between the different sides of a house. What IT sees as a limited ability to respond and what, risk management and business continuity may see as a limited ability to respond. But before I move on to some of these issues, I'm going to ask Sabrina again, how does some of these challenges compare to what you've seen, when you're talking to your customers? What are the key pain points that they've been running into?
Yeah, Jim, we're hearing similar things from our customers. When I look at the list of challenges, recognized by the survey respondents here, these are gaps that we help them solve, through our CEM solutions. If we look at, you talked a little bit about this, but if we look at the lack of 100% reach as a challenge, for example, and let's, again, putting COVID aside, right? Because, we are probably now a more dispersed workforce than ever, but the dynamics of the remote workforce is not necessarily new, right? Organizations have had many remote workers and employees, so whether it's part-time or in-field workers, and they all have different levels of access, right, to company information. And because they're in different physical spaces and environments, right, they consume information differently. So having that ability to communicate with them, right, broadly based on, and it's about really based on giving them or getting them the information in the way that they are able to consume it, right, through those different modalities and those channels. And that's what CEM really helps solve. But then let's take it up another level, right? So when you have that challenge solved in terms of the delivery of that communication, how do you know they received the message? Do you know if they're okay? Do they need help? Can they respond to you? So that two-way communication capability that CEM offers is important. And again, that situational awareness, that intelligence that you can get back through their responses is key to really help you move forward in your recovery of that specific event, right? So you can measure the impact of the situation, respond quicker, and implement whatever next steps that you need to. The other key challenge that I want to recognize on this list that you talked about is around integrations with key business systems and ineffective communications between departments. Because we talked a little bit about that earlier, right? The lack of, that organization or the lack of that, coordination across departments. Well, one example of how we're working to solve this is with Microsoft Teams. So the adoption of that application has grown exponentially over the last year, in part due to the nature of, again, the dispersed workforce. And so we've worked with Microsoft to offer Microsoft out of the box Microsoft Teams integration with our CEM solution. So imagine, solving real business challenges and events using the tools and communication channels that everyone is really familiar with and already using. So being able to kick off an incident response flow or a conference call right within the Teams application. So to collaborate, whether it's with our incident response team or mass notify a targeted group of people. We understand how important these kinds of integrations are to reduce overall downtime and really, obviously, and making it compelling, right? And making, CEM seamless in your technology stack. Imagine being able to draw up a map, right? And that map shows where your critical assets and your people are, let's say during an extreme weather event. And from that particular, console there, then you're able to target individuals who are affected, send them a specific message, right? Providing them with instructions or just maybe surveying them, are they okay during that event? And then gather the responses through that process and then, initiate further action if needed. We actually recently just announced a collaboration, Jim, with the University of Windsor, a Canadian university, a FLID, RUSC, and clean water monitoring technology. And that's a prime example of how advanced integrations and automation and process can be driven by CEM. So with this collaboration, sensors are monitoring the water quality and flood levels and provide that information back to key individuals overseeing water management, like in the community. So in the event something doesn't look right, a response can automatically be implemented. So whether it's, addressing the water issue immediately with, those who need to get involved to collaborate and solve the problem, or, perhaps you need to notify a larger group of people. So don't drink the water, for example, or boil it before using. So this is really the type of intelligence that CEM is providing, and that automation in the process, right? So that real-time monitoring becomes critical so that you can become aware of risks faster and then respond faster as well.
Yeah, Sabrina, that was great. And I really like how you kind of brought some of the real world examples to some of these numbers, like the importance of integration, the importance of reach, being under, not just to reach everybody, to understand the people you absolutely need to reach, the ones who are being impacted by an event. That was really, really great details. And also, you talked about the importance of the collaboration between the different stakeholders. That's one of the key benefits of critical event management, that we're seeing. And really, when we're talking about this, there's kind of, as you can see from some of the things, that Sabrina and I have been talking about, from on the one side, cybersecurity and IT issues, and on the other side, these kind of corporate risk, disaster, power outages, impact, and really kind of tying those together and providing this kind of complete holistic view. And I hate to use the term holistic, but in this case, it applies, of these kind of how to respond and how to understand these critical events. And that really comes to understanding some of the rules. So just to kind of explain how we did the research for where all this data is coming from, we looked across everyone who utilizes these tools, everyone who uses critical event management. And we were able to compare how cybersecurity and IT roles approach critical event management, how they're impacted by it, what they want from it, what's most important, what strategies they follow, and also compare that to the other side of the house that utilizes these tools, namely people like corporate security and management, emergency and risk management, business continuity. They all not only have to use these, they have to use them together. They have to work together. And it's interesting because we do see different things between when you compare the two groups. For example, when we look at the cybersecurity and IT users, the things that matter to them are speed of resolution. Once they've identified an issue, they want to fix it as fast as humanly possible. Also, the ability to communicate with their employees and stakeholders is especially important on the cybersecurity and IT side. You think of detecting a ransomware attack, or some kind of security penetration, or knowing that there's a spear phishing of some kind happening. Being able, as an IT and cybersecurity side, getting that information out to everybody limits, once everybody knows, hey, we're being targeted, somebody's sending fake emails and communications that look like they come from IT or look like they come from the CEO. That can be the difference between having massive data loss or having no data loss whatsoever. So, that's why we broke it down that way. And we're going to dive into this a little bit more here so you can see some of the key priorities. So in this question, we asked both IT roles, and the all others means, in the case of this survey, all those other people we mentioned, business continuity, risk management, corporate management, what the key things, what they wanted to see improved, and the things that are forcing them to upgrade and improve their critical event management. And it's interesting because you see diverging priorities. So if you look on the left side, the things most important to IT roles and cybersecurity roles is the length of critical event resolution. To them, the most important thing, the reason they want to upgrade their critical event management is to resolve critical events quickly. And as we see, as I just mentioned on the other slide, the second most important thing for them is being able to reach all employees and stakeholders and assets increasingly. If you're in manufacturing or in many other businesses where you have smart devices, you have Internet of Things devices, being able to protect them from critical events is just as important. And obviously the ability to utilize the right data sources, this is something that's kind of ingrained in IT and cybersecurity for the last 20, 30 years. You want to make sure you're leveraging the right information, that you have the right data sources to understand what's happening in a critical event. Then you look to the right side, and this is these kind of more on the traditional risk management, business continuity side. The thing that makes them improve, that's one of their biggest pain points, is an inability to take rapid action when incidents occur. And this is intuitively makes sense to me, because when you think of a traditional IT or cybersecurity issue, having worked in those areas, there's always pretty much something you can do immediately. If you detect a cybersecurity attack, you can shut down systems under attack. You can utilize different IT systems. When you're running in an outage of some kind, even in the cloud, you can maybe move to backup systems. You can leverage disaster recovery. Even if those things are working, you have things you're doing to try and resolve a cybersecurity or IT issue. On the other hand, if you know a major hurricane's coming, everything you're doing is basically risk mitigation. If there's a massive power outage or something like that, you can't stop it from happening. You're just trying to limit the impact. Equally for both sides is this sort of limited ability to take effective action, with critical event information. And Sabrina brought this up in a really great example, and it is about knowing everything. So if there's a natural disaster or weather event occurring, being able to know who's being most impacted. So this is kind of an interesting way to see some of these different ways and different perceptions of critical event management between these different roles that are utilizing these systems.
Mm-hmm.
I've just kind of gone over these differences between IT and cybersecurity, and the things that they, the requirements that they have compared to other roles. I'm just kind of interested to get some of your insight, especially that you work with so many businesses that are dealing with these issues. What's your perspective between the difference between cybersecurity and IT and traditional risk management and business continuity?
Yeah, so it's interesting, Jim, because we actually, earlier this year, we surveyed our customers as well to get a better understanding, right, of how they were using our CEM solutions. And we kind of framed a question outside of, how they were using it outside of, critical emergency events, right? So those man-made or Mother Nature related events. And in fact, the biggest, concern and process that organizations were tackling with our CEM was IT and cyber related threats, right? So you kind of now start to really see the breadth of the use cases that CEM is capable of managing. And you mentioned this, right? So traditionally, we've seen these CEM type tools and emergency mass notification tools, isolated to those teams, right? To those, physical security teams, right? But those best practices, right? So when you see these, the pressures, right? When you see, the important things that, are needed, when it comes to managing a critical event, like the best practices, they're not isolated, right, to those emergency management teams, right? There's a common set of processes that can be kind of applied across, right? So if we think about cyber attack or an IT issue, there's a lot of work that, everyone is experts on, right, in terms of identifying that attack, right, doing some immediate response work. But majority of the times, right, it's also a situation where you need to bring people together, right? Do some of that collaboration as you work through the response of the attack in real time or the aftermath of dealing with it. From a cyber security perspective, there's a lot of tools out there, things like SIMS, BlackBerry cyber software as an example, all different types of tools that are monitoring and detecting events. And we've got SOAR technology as well that's helping, you put all that data together and determining which things need to be escalated, which things need to become a critical event. And but then it sort of has to become a handover, right? And so this is where, we feel that we move from that chaos, right, where that handover takes place to invoke something in the organization. So instead of people going through spreadsheets, right, who should I talk to? Who should I hand this issue over to next, right? So if we turn this over to critical event management platform as an example, we've already got those plans in place, right? You have the ability to tie into different collaboration tools in different environments, reach people through lots of channels. And some of those could even be out of band channels, right? So if your network is compromised and you don't want to use your internal email systems or your internal communication systems, so you want an out of band option. And that's where critical event management, that's really what it brings, right? So the ability to structure that response, plan ahead of time, anticipate what's going to happen, and make sure that you have all the collaboration mechanism and communications in place to be able to be effective in your response. So reducing overall system downtime, you talked about this, right? And get operations back and running quickly. So that's really where we see the benefits of something like a platform like this to the IT and to the cybersecurity groups.
Yeah, no, those are all really great points. And since you brought up that, the time to get operations back up running, the time to resolve downtime, we're going to show you why this is so important, why the number one pressure is length of critical event resolution in this very next slide. In our research, we found that on average, an hour of downtime could cost organizations over $300,000. And that's the average number, which sometimes people don't like to use average. So we've also done, what we call a Monte Carlo analysis. So, which means, what's the risk of something happening? And there's, whenever there's downtime for a business, there's always a 20% chance that downtime will cost you $3 million. So, there's a chance, there's like a 20% chance that, you won't experience any massive downtime. But, the cost of downtime is huge for businesses. Usually it's going to be six figures if you have anything that's of a significant amount of time. So this is really why this time to response is so important, especially in the context of, as we saw earlier, IT outages being one of the #1 critical events that businesses are running into. So if you think of like, if a business has, 4 or 5 outages a year that run over an hour or so, they're looking at millions in lost revenue. So, this is why this is so important. This is why speed to resolution, understanding the scope of an impact, and getting all the right stakeholders involved and collaborating is so important, and why we're seeing critical event management be so vital for these businesses in responding to these kind of critical events and disasters. And by doing so, these businesses can really gain some benefits. So, continuing on from this kind of discussion about, the different approaches to cybersecurity and IT roles when they're implementing critical event management, we asked them what their key wants. What, if you could get anything out of your critical event management, what would it be? So they want improved tracking for more types of critical events. Again, this is this, expansion that critical event management brings to these traditional notification systems. They want to be able to track everything that's disruptive to the business, from, weather problems and outages to ransomware attacks and DDoS attacks and, just cloud outages. They really want to be able to track all of this stuff to better understand the impact to their business. As anyone who's done security monitoring, or even network monitoring, even development tools, one of the key IT capabilities is always the ability to narrow down alerts. Nobody wants to deal with alert storms. The more false alerts you get, the more likely you are to miss a key important alert. So one of the key things that IT roles and cybersecurity want from a critical event is the ability to narrow it down so they're only seeing the really vital roles. So they want to be able to track everything, but they only want to get alerted on the things that are truly important. They want that information as fast as humanly possible. Again, we just saw the cost of downtime grows very quickly. So the sooner you get relevant information, the more quickly as a business you can respond to those things. And again, tying into that ability to filter and narrow your alerts is your better capabilities to customize alerts. Every business is different. It's not a one-size-fits-all scenario. So all these different organizations, from government to schools to hospitals to manufacturing to insurance companies to regular IT firms, they all have different things that they need to track, and they're looking for ways to customize those alerts. And when businesses have critical event management tools that really help them get this, they really start to see significant improvements, especially when it comes to understanding issues. So, for example, we found in our research that when we looked at businesses that had implemented critical event management, 43% of them reported improvements in planning and forecasting. So, again, this is an ability to avoid problems before they happen, or when they happen, they become very familiar, and your organization can respond to it very quickly. I could say you could treat it like a vaccine for your business, but I won't say that. but it is about understanding problems before they impact your organization. So your organization, it can be of limited impact or hopefully even no impact whatsoever. So we mentioned that as a benefit, but we've seen other benefits that businesses that have implemented critical event management have gained through their adoption of this technology. Before I go through the benefits that we've seen in the Aberdeen research, I'm going to ask another question of Sabrina. I'm just kind of curious, having talked to your customers and your clients that have adopted critical event management, what are some of the benefits that you've seen them gain by taking this step?
Yeah, so if we can, at a very tactical level, the benefits are having that one unified platform to hold plans, the templates, preset messages for really all critical events that organizations deem to be, critical, right? But also having that flexibility, right, to adjust those plans on the fly. So that's one thing that I would, that's the first thing I would call out. But then with that in place as well, you've got that one platform that holds your processes, but the mechanisms, right, and those workflows to reach people quickly. So that response to the situation, right, through secure collaboration. And then, we talked about this a little bit, right? So becoming aware of incidents earlier, right? Through integrations with other business systems and devices, the flexibility in communication channels and modalities, right? Reaching people where they are, where they work, the situational intelligence, right? That need for understanding where their critical assets are and their people are. But also one other thing too is the ability to audit and track. And I don't think we didn't talk about this much, but especially from an IT cyber perspective, right? A lot of the auditing, like the tracking ability, that the decisions and the communications throughout, like, a lot of that is all subject to review, right? After the fact. And so that's something as well that our customers are really talking about and seeing benefits from. So, again, whether it's being able to do that from an auditing or a legal perspective, or just really being able to, identify gaps after the fact and improve like your processes over time.
Yeah, as we just talked about how, the IT and cybersecurity roles want to be able to track everything. So it's great to see that you've seen the businesses are seeing that benefit. And across all of our, at Aberdeen, across all of our IT practice, integration and having a unified system in place, those are always key criteria for almost any technology implementation. So it's no surprise it's great that these businesses are seeing that benefit, and it's no surprise that that's such a key important thing that they want from these kind of capabilities, from implementing critical event management. And as Sabrina mentioned, that's what she's seen from customers. In our research, we asked businesses what the top benefits, we looked at the metrics, and we found that when an organization has critical event management, they are 70% more likely than other businesses to be able to really analyze and understand the impact of a critical event in minutes or less. We talk to those challenges, to those requirements. Speed, speed to resolution is vital, and you can't resolve something that you don't understand. So, that's a core criteria to being able to successfully, respond to a critical event, is being able to understand it in minutes or less. I mean, that's critical. To use an important term there. These businesses, they're 3 times more likely than their peers to be able to resolve a critical event in less than 24 hours. And that's really important too, because obviously we're talking all critical events. So, IT event, you clearly don't want to have IT outage for that lasts more than a day. But, you think of the impact of things like storms and other issues that can be, very long. So the fact that these businesses are 3 times more likely to resolve a critical event in less than 24 hours is really vital to success, and really saving, that can be disastrous for some organizations. So being able to resolve quickly is often a life or death situation for some of these organizations. And, even more importantly, we talked about that how these businesses are more likely to be able to predict and prevent things that could happen. We see here that when a business has critical event management in place, they're 2 times more likely to see no or limited impact to their revenue from a critical event, that they were able to kind of protect their business from the worst effects of these critical events, whether it is a cyber attack or a cloud outage or, a storm or some other kind of natural disaster. So these are some of the things we've seen in our research. And I have some recommendations that I plan to provide later on. But before I'm about to hand off to Sabrina to talk about some of the things that BlackBerry is doing to help businesses achieve some of these benefits and overcome some of these challenges we've talked about. But before I hand it off to you, I'd be interested, if you were like, maybe not riding an elevator, but if you're speaking to a potential client, what would be your short pitch, your short words of wisdom to them on why they should be implementing critical event management?
Yeah. So Jim, first of all, I would say that, those stats that you just ran through, those are some pretty compelling, reasons and, for implementing CM. So that's some great ROI, right there. So what I would say is the problems and consequences, they're real. In addition to actually the survey that you've conducted, and, there's further validation out there as well. From the recent BCI, so Business Continuity Institute survey from this year, you can see that close to 65% of loss of productivity organizations are experiencing. It's bad for morale. It affects customers at the end of the day, and it affects their revenue too. And really, these are measurable dollars. Like the terms of measurable dollars, it's a lot of money, right? We're talking about 3.86 million in data breaches from this particular port. Jim, you talked a little bit about it. 1.8 million in safety incidents. And so while we won't eliminate these events, we'll help organizations manage them more effectively with CEM solutions. So again, minimizing the impact, shortening time to response and resolve, and minimizing the negative impact, which will bring the cost of responding to these events down over time significantly. So I'd ask them to consider our approach, right? It's based on tried and true decades of experience. Prepare for critical events. Have plans in place on how you're going to respond to major events through one set of business processes and one set of tools across the organization, right? So with this mechanism and process, you can then be ready to kick off your workflows, initiate response activities when a situation arrives. And then do the communications, right, associated to those situations. Collect the data back, that situational intelligence from affected systems and people. So then you can properly recover and get back to normal operations. And then again, we talked about the ability to audit and review all those decisions throughout the process, right? So after the fact, can you sit down, do a post-assessment, look for ways to improve, feed that, back into your preparation process. And then by pulling this all together, you're able to mitigate, resolve crisis or situations as they come up, and hopefully be able to do that in a way that's aligned back to the plan that you already had in place. And so this can all be done with BlackBerry Critical Event Management. So we have two solutions: BlackBerry Alert for commercial organizations, BlackBerry Ad Hoc for government. We feel like we're the next gen critical event management solution that can help you do that. So again, giving you those tools and those capabilities to support each phase of event lifecycle management. So enabling that overall business continuity, allowing organizations to keep their operations running and people safe. And those organizations who have a responsibility for public safety, it also delivers a citywide response to critical events. So to learn more, you can visit blackberry.com/CEM. Or you can always get in touch with one of our representatives as well.
Thanks, Sabrina. That was great. Definitely touches on a lot of the key challenges we talked about. So thanks for that information. Sabrina gave us her sort of elevator pitch on why you should implement critical event management. We've seen the benefits. We've seen how it can help organizations overcome the challenges and pain points that they're running into, both from an IT and cybersecurity standpoint, and from a risk management, business continuity, physical security standpoint. So looking at when we look at the leaders and looking at the things that they were doing to succeed, we were able to come up with a few key recommendations. So what we've seen is you definitely want to build a strong foundation. You want to understand your current needs. You want to understand where your business is exposed. The things that could be a major problem for you, whether it is people not being able to come into your business, or supply chain problems, or if it's cloud outages or power outages. Really understand where your biggest points of exposure are, and who the key roles are that are going to have to respond to these things. If you do all that, you're going to have a much better level of success, and really ensure that all stakeholders, IT, cybersecurity, business continuity, are working together and really have understanding of everything from assets, employees, and offices and locations that will be impacted by any critical event. We've also found that you really need to modernize your critical event management capabilities. I mean, we find that across IT, businesses are aggressively modernizing. They're modernizing their cloud, they're modernizing their data center and on-prem capabilities, they're modernizing how they develop applications. And you really need to modernize your critical event management capabilities as well. When businesses look for solutions that can take advantage of artificial intelligence, which will give you better prediction, better information, when they have systems that can communicate anywhere, anytime, on any device, that gives them that 100% reach that they need. And when they have predictive analytics, they can resolve issues faster, they can get that kind of audit and deep understanding tracking that Sabrina spoke about. And when they do all of this, we've seen one of the benefits they get is that they can prevent and even limit the impact of future disruptions. And tied to that is really being ready for not just what's happening today, but what's happening tomorrow. Nobody would have predicted the last year, a few years ago. And we can't predict the coming years and what the big critical events are. So, they're going to bring new disruptions, new disasters, new types of cybersecurity issues. And we found that the businesses that are leaders are really implementing critical event management that takes advantage of all of these new technologies, that understands the new technologies, that integrates with them and can track them. And when they do this, they really, boost their capabilities to respond. They increase collaboration across teams, and they really improve their ability to protect all of their core company assets.
So if you're interested in this research, at Aberdeen, we've done a few white papers and blogs and other pieces covering critical event management and some of the trends there. We also obviously have a wide variety of research and reports covering many different technology practices, including artificial intelligence, IT modernization, cloud, you name it. So it's all available at aberdeen.com. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sabrina to take over our Q&A session.
Great. Thanks, Jim. Really enjoyed our conversation and all the insights into your team's research. So really thank you for the conversation. Thank you for taking us through that. We do have some time here, and I see that there's some questions in the chat. I thought maybe we could answer them live. Just looking here, the first one actually seems, Jim, like a question for you here. And the question is, in your opinion, and I guess, the research has validated that, there's a need and, CM is solving the challenges, right, that, the obstacles or just some of the needs around managing critical events. So in your opinion, have you seen change in enterprises or adoption in implementing these formal systems? So I think we talked a little bit about, obviously, systems like this being isolated, right, to certain specific groups and or governments, right, looking at it from a public safety angle. But the question is, so have you seen much adoption in enterprises?
Yeah, we're definitely seeing adoption in enterprises. In fact, our recent survey that we did, where most of the data you saw about critical event management, that was probably more than 50%. I believe that 55 to 60% would have been non-traditional, emergency notification users. So we're seeing quite a large number of IT. We broke it down by role. It was a large portion of respondents were IT roles or cybersecurity roles. So we're definitely seeing that. And I think part of that driver is, for years, I've been involved in IT and a lot of these areas for over 20 years, and there's been a big move to kind of unify, to cut down on the number of screens, especially when it comes to vital information like this, whether it is, IT outages, cybersecurity attacks, or, weather emergencies. All of these things need to be responded to if you're working from a NOC, or if you have remote IT that needs to access these things over mobile or from working at home. The less number of interfaces, the less number of screens, the more integrated the data is, the better. So, there's been a huge interest in this, and if you look at the way you had to respond to this before critical event management systems came on, it was very disjointed, and that's tough because these groups have to work together. If, a lot of times, there's both, if a hurricane comes and knocks out parts of your data centers, that's both a physical security issue and an IT issue. So, and they need to work together. They need to be sharing the same information. They need to be on, looking at the same data. So, I do think a lot of trends like that have driven the adoption of critical event management, within enterprise and within these sort of IT and cybersecurity groups.
So thanks for reiterating and hitting back on those points, because I agree with you. That's really, really important. Another question here it's probably more directed to me, but feel free to weigh in as well if you have some experience too, or if you've had some feedback. So critical event management sounds like a logical approach to managing critical events. Is it hard to implement? So the way I think about it, so I think it's hard to implement. So my thought on that is, from a technology perspective, it's not overly complicated, right? So Jim, you talked about the simplicity, right, of having maybe vendor consolidation too is something that you want to think about throughout this. But from my perspective, the biggest challenge I think organizations have around is more around processes and driving the adoption, I would say. And so the key there is not only putting the system in place, but having that thoughtful rollout plan. So, and also the branding that the critical event messaging has, right? So people know that it's something really important that they should respond to. It's serious, right? And it affects them. So not, for example, that, we're having a social event. So complexity for me is more around the adoption. But the good news is that we have a lot of best practices, right? We have a lot of experience. So the key there is to do the planning, that rollout, and not really to kind of stutter along, because we think, it's hard to get the right adoption if it's not done right from the beginning. Jim, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I kind of tying to that, I do feel that it's, in many ways, it's easier than not having it. I guess would be the biggest answer. When you look at what you have to do without a critical event management system, where you're trying to tie together these disparate systems, when you maybe often don't have the information you need, definitely having a critical event management system in place is easier than trying to do this on your own. So that would be my response to that.
I know. So, with that, we'll probably conclude our webinar today. So, Jim, again, I want to thank you for joining me today and really taking us through the thoughtful research and, sharing, your thoughts, your independent thoughts and stats around the subject. So for everyone joining us today, on your screen, you will see a list of additional resources that are available to you that you can check out and download, including white papers and also the Aberdeen CEM research report that Jim took us through here. So there'll be a full details and summary around that. So you will get access to that after this too. And with that, I just want to thank everyone for attending today. And again, Jim, thank you for joining me, and enjoy the rest of the day. Thanks, everyone.